you. We are here for you. So please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat box. Let us know your role and what part of the world you are joining us from today. Good morning, Joe Sanfilippo.
How you doing, Jimmy?
I'm doing good, buddy. How you doing? You make me a little nervous. You had a big night last night, big celebration. I saw it all over Facebook. Talk to me about it. What happened last night?
Yeah. We had our kids won a conference championship last night, and so it was a good night. It was really packed gym, and my son's a senior this year, so it's kind of their last shot at it. They won the conference and beat the team that was tied with them for the conference. So it was a really fun night. Both teams played super hard, and the crowd was just crazy. So it was fun. But I'm late this morning because I was walking to work and walking here and making a video.
I didn't realize. I thought it only took 1 minute to walk to work.
It does, Jimmy. It does. But here's the thing: is that I can't feel my fingers right now. I don't even know. I gotta check the weather because I was just out there making it, and I can't feel. What is it? I mean, it's okay. So it's 9. It's 9. It doesn't even feel like it must feel. Oh, the wind must be worse because I can't feel my fingers. It's awful, Jimmy. And that's what I was talking about on the thing. I'm like, what? Why do I live? It's 0. Yeah, 0. Okay. So why do I live in a place that when I walk across the street, my face hurts from the wind, and I can't feel my face. I walked across the street, Jimmy. I walked across the street. I can't feel my fingers.
Jeff,
God.
Joe, your hands do look really red. I'm a little worried about. Are you sure they're not frostbitten?
You don't talk to me about that right now. I don't need that. We're not going to have that issue right now. Oh my goodness. I can't even, I don't even I'm shook. I'm shook, man. I'm like, my fingers, I can't feel them. Anyway, enough about me. A great night last night. Congratulations to the kids. Here's the thing that was really cool for me as a dad. It was awesome to see, your son play in that whole situation. But I've been coaching these seniors, since they're in 2nd, 3rd grade. And it was cool from 2nd grade to 8th grade. I got to, be at every tournament with them, and I got to hang out with them on a weekend. And they're not all there from the ones that started, but that whole sequence from when they started in 2nd grade to the 4 that are left that walked out on the floor last night for senior night, it was really special to kind of sit back. And I talked to one of the other guys that I coached with up until this point, and we just kind of sat there. You could tell. I saw him after the game, and we were just tearing up, and just we were just watching the whole thing. We weren't even connected. We were just kind of sitting there and watching. And it was a really special moment. So congratulations to them. They did all the work. I just got a chance to yell and scream and cheer them on, and I love all of them. So it was fun to do.
Yeah, it's so cool, right? I can see how emotional it is in those moments, right? And it doesn't matter what it is, right? Whether it's basketball last night or it's show choir, it's girls swimming or the cross country meet. I mean, that's one of the things, honestly, I miss most about, being a principal is going to all those different types of events and watching the kids and the families and whether it's the energy itself, right? Just the energy itself when you walk into an environment like that, I can see it now. And those are the things that we have to cherish, right? Because we know how difficult the job is. We know it's grinding every day, but which is even more reason why we need to, find that joy again, as we talked about last week, by going to the events and also seeing kids in a different environment, right? That's always cool too, right? You see them one way in the classroom, you see them another way in the hallways or the cafeteria, and then you see them at these events, and they're like a totally different student sometimes, and just in terms of how disciplined they are, or the passion or the work ethic they bring to something. And it's just a reminder again why it's really important to see kids in different types of environments. And so that's awesome. And so congratulations to you and your son. I know at the beginning of the year, it was a rough start there, him having to sit out a little bit because of whether it's contact tracing or COVID or whatever it was, right? And so that's a great way, and he'll always remember that. So that's awesome. So, well, good morning, everybody. Again, we're so excited here this morning. And again, if you want to introduce yourself, please go do that. We have a shy group this morning so far, Joe jumping in this morning, but go ahead, let us know who you are, who's jumping in the studio with us this morning. If you are interested in jumping into the studio this morning, whether you go live on camera or just voice, let us know. If there is an issue, a problem of practice that you want to discuss with us, we know sometimes that can get a little strange. You're like, yeah, I do, but I don't really want to talk about it. Just let us know. Certainly we can put it still. You'll see this. We're going to put it in the chat box, our email, So you can also email us your problem of practice, and then we can actually talk about it confidentially, right? Or anonymously, I should say, on live on the show here without disclosing who the individual is or who the school, but just a general problem of practice. Because let's be honest, we all deal with the same kinds of issues in our schools, right? I don't think those issues or problem of practice are unique. And then if you have a thought or a comment how to address that problem of practice, maybe you've experienced it and there are some ways that you have addressed that or approached it that you would like to come into the studio to talk about that problem of practice from your perspective, we'd love to have you come in as well. So, Joe, is there anything that you have on your mind that you want to talk about this morning? I know this week I was out and about, and so obviously spent a lot of time in buildings this week and continue to talk to school leaders about the issues that they're facing. So there's all sorts of things we can talk about, but want to see if you had anything in mind just in terms of your experience, what happened in your district or while you were out on the road this week as well.
Well, I think a couple of things. One of the things I talked about on the walk video this morning is how is our reaction to someone else's behavior, right? And the idea that our reaction, we can have these. Yesterday was a great day, right? We had a great day. I had a great day. I was speaking to a group in Horicon, Wisconsin. They were fantastic. The home of the Marshmen, Jimmy, Marshmen, right? So I go from crickets to marshmen, two unique mascots that nobody else has in the world has. Marshmen, one. Crickets, one, right? And so that was pretty cool. And then I came to the game last night, and I had like probably maybe 50, 75 at least interactions with people yesterday. And they were real positive interactions. I had one interaction yesterday that was negative. One. Just one. But I'm still thinking about it and thinking about how I could have handled it differently. And thinking about like what could have been said, what could have been done, my reaction to someone else's behavior, like that's on me. I didn't handle it nearly as well as I would have wanted to, right? But that's totally on me, 100% on me in terms of my reaction to someone else's behavior, right? Whatever that behavior is, if it's something that's good, bad, if it's something in the middle, how we react is really on us. So what are we doing to not only put ourselves in the right mindset to have a positive reaction to something that may not go our way, but at the same time, are we open enough to see it and say, I probably should handle that differently or better? And honestly, that's kind of what I'm doing today because of all the great things that happened yesterday. I mean, kid wins, his team wins a conference title and the gym was pumping and everything was awesome and the pictures and everything after. But I woke up this morning and I'm thinking about, how I reacted to someone else's behavior. And that's on me. So, I don't know. I think it's one of those things where if we can figure out ways and understand that even though the good outweighs the bad, there are some times that we got to kind of get out of our own way sometimes too, because I need to stop thinking about that on some level and think about all the great things that are happening. I have to acknowledge that it happened and make sure that it doesn't happen again. But if that drives me and drives my thought process moving forward, now I'm impacting interactions moving forward because I'm still thinking about something that I can't control anymore.
Yeah, there's so much there that you just shared, Joe. And in my mind's like going 100 different places right now as you're talking to that, right? Because I think they're all interconnected with one another. As you're talking about, the first thing I think was, well, first of all, Joe, we're not perfect beings, right?
Yeah.
No matter how much we strive, right, to live our excellence, right? We're not talking about perfection. We're not saying live your perfection. It's striving just to become a better version of ourselves. And so but we're really hard on ourselves, right? Especially school leaders, right? Or a teacher in a classroom, when we don't make the impact or we kind of misstep, right? We're very, very hard on ourselves sometimes. And that's not a bad thing. I think it's a self-awareness. I think that's a great attribute to have, right? People that are very self-aware seem to be able to move through that very quickly because they just own it, right? They just own it.
Right.
They try to go back and make it right? Whether it's through an apology, or even in fact, I always say, how do we forgive those who have wronged us? That's part of it too. That's just as difficult. But I know yesterday it bothered you. You know why I know? Because you texted it to me that it bothered you. And that's what's interesting, right? So yesterday you get done, you have an amazing day, you have an amazing audience, and then you still can't get your head out of this one individual, right? And so again, it just kind of goes back again, people. So those in the audience today, again, Joe and I were never going to pretend like we have it right or we have a monopoly on this or we know it all. We don't. But we have experiences and we have an opinion just like all of you in the audience today. So as we talk through this a little bit, if you have a thought on your mind that you want to jump in the studio and share with us, again, either visually or just audio, we'd love to hear your ideas and thoughts on this topic. But one of the things I start thinking about, Joe, is it's a reminder again that when we're talking about culture, right, we're talking about leadership. People behave the way they behave based on past experiences. Culture is about behavior. If we look at the people and how they're behaving in an organization, I think it says something about our culture. And so we have to always understand and recognize that. And so one of the things I know for me, as you started saying that, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I used to get frustrated with people, and I would actually, I judge people. I would judge them for the way they treated kids. I would be negative about the way they, addressed kids that were, playing gotcha games or whatever it was, right? And every time that happened, it's almost like it triggers something in you, right? Anyone who's ever had a bad experience with something, if they see it again from the outside observing it, it almost like it triggers. And sometimes I don't even like that word, but it does something to you, right? That takes you back to that moment. And then it's like the ugly comes out in me, right? Like, I'm like, who the hell, why are you teaching or why are you being a principal if you don't even like kids or working with people, right? And so part of it, that's where I start, you struggle with that a little bit, right? And I think that's just the human or the humanity within all of us, right? Whether it's our compassion, it's our empathy, but it's our experience. And so, so how do we help our audience? How do we help our principals? How do we help our teachers and fellow educators say, but how do I then work past that, Jimmy or Joe? How do I work past that? So one thing I'll share, and then Joe, you can share a thought. If someone wants to jump in and talk to us a little bit, is one thing I try to think now is I just try to reframe it. I just try to see it differently. So when I see someone behaving in a certain way that doesn't meet the standard, right, or isn't excellent, or isn't who we want to represent ourselves in that manner, I try to reframe it. And instead of judging or being critical, I flip it quickly in my head, right? Like I flip it and I say to myself, I wonder what happened to that person. Because now it's more coming from an eyes of empathy and understanding that that person has had experiences, and I don't know what those experiences are, right? So that's the story. That individual has a story. So where we can live our excellence and where we can become a better version of ourselves is, what if we approach it differently? What if we, first of all, in our mind say, I wonder what happened to that individual? And because we have to believe the individual really doesn't want to be that way, they just landed there. That's where they're at today, or that's where they're at in the moment, or this part of their life. But if we get to understand that story by saying, hey, are you okay? How are you doing? I'm worried about you, especially if it's one of your own staff members, right? So we approach it differently. We listen to what the experiences that they've had, and hopefully they'll share those with us, right? Now, let's be honest, sometimes they won't either. Sometimes they're a little guarded. Sometimes they'll dismiss it. Sometimes they don't want to talk about it. Or sometimes they don't trust you or have a connection with you that they even want to talk to you about it. Well, then that tells me something again, right? That tells me I haven't invested enough in that relationship. So that's on me, not on them. If they're not willing to talk to me, then I haven't created that relationship or that bond for them to trust me. So I have to reflect on that. And so therefore I have to be more intentional and investing more of my personal time on the front end. I can't be disingenuous and wait for something to happen and then think I'm going to come in and be the hero and you'll tell me, when you have no connection with me. But it's not because of them, it's because of me. And so maybe just starting quickly with a reframing, checking from an eyes of empathy or compassion, and seeing if they are willing to share that. And if not, then I think it tells us a little bit about the relationship and how much we have or haven't invested in that relationship.
And I think that kind of lends itself to the idea that if we truly believe that everybody's doing their best work, then we need to treat them like they're doing their best work, right? Like,
That's
I don't think I don't think people wake up in the morning and say, I can't wait to be average today, right? Like average is not a place that you aspire to be. It's a place that you end up. It's like going to Denny's, right? Like nobody goes to Denny's, you just end up there. That's what happens with average, because you fall back into a spot where you don't feel valued for the work that you do. So how are we making sure that we put ourselves in a situation where we can see the greatness around us, but also understand that people are doing the best that they can at that particular time? You talked about how, we don't know what people are going through or how they got there, but if we treat them in a way that says, okay, so here's where we are, here's what you're doing, and I know you're doing the best that you can. Is there anything that I can do to help in that situation? I think, like you said, we reframe that conversation a little bit differently. I think that there's a lot of people in buildings, though, that kind of fall into that other category that you're talking about, where they're not willing to talk to you about something that's going on, and it happens for two reasons. The first thing is that you haven't built a relationship with them like you had
Mhm.
mentioned, but the second thing is they were hurt before by somebody that you had nothing to do with, right?
Right.
It happened before, the administrator before, two administrators before, three administrators before, whatever the case may be, and now you're dealing with the fallout of what happened that you didn't control. And you can be upset about that, but at the same time, that doesn't help. It doesn't help. Like, you can
Mhm.
be mad all you want that it's somebody else's fault that they don't trust administrators, but at the same time, that doesn't help your situation. So what can you do tomorrow to fix that conversation, or today to fix that conversation? Because wherever we go, I mean, there are times that we have to really understand that the position that we hold often takes over for the connection that we can make before we can make that connection. And that's tough to think about, but at the same time, that's what it is. It's the reality of what it is. And so I took over for a kindergarten aide a couple years ago. A couple years ago, we did the for one of our personal day giveaways. I was a kindergarten aide, and I was in this kindergarten teacher's room, and she is incredible. She's a phenomenal teacher, absolutely phenomenal. She does incredible work. She's wonderful. I literally sat for the first, I don't know, maybe the first hour of the day, and I'm thinking to myself, I just like sat there in awe of her because she's wonderful, right? And I'm helping out as much as I can throughout the course of the day. I'm telling her all day, "You're fantastic, man. You're just doing really great stuff. I love what you're doing. I love this. Is really fun for me, and I'm working with the kids and everything." And I was in the whole day after the day was over. I stayed after a little bit, talked to her. I said, I just want to say thank you, because what I saw today was really what kids should get and the experience that kids should get. And I felt great. Not only did I feel good about being in there, but I felt good about me, making sure that they knew how much I cared about them in that spot, right? So I go
Mhm.
home and I'm sitting there and we're talking to my wife, and she goes, "Hey, you're probably gonna want to see her Facebook post from a couple minutes ago." And I'm like, "Oh man." So I looked at the Facebook post, and her Facebook post was that it was great to have Dr. Sanfilippo in the room all day. He did a great job with the kids. It was really nice to have him, but it felt like a full day observation. And I was crushed. I was absolutely crushed. I did everything in my power to not make it feel like I was there to observe. But at the same time, because of the position that I hold, I'm not even her supervisor, right?
Uh-huh.
But because of the position that I hold, it impacts the way that you're perceived. And and so that just meant that it's on me to make sure that I was in that space more. So I ended up just going to that space more like every day, just checking on the kids. And then finally she's like, "Yeah, Joe, okay, I get it. I get it. Okay, I got, you're okay. You don't need to be here every second." I was on me. I had to figure out a way that I could change that conversation. And I don't know if I have, but at the same time, I have to try, right? You're still
Uh-huh.
kind of in that situation where your position is going to take over for the connection that you can make sometimes, and that's just what it is.
I'm laughing, Joe, because my while you were talking there right at the end about the last 30 seconds there, my computer I think is overheating. It's like the fan just came on, right? And so the fan comes on, my camera's freezing, my lights are dimming. I'm getting all these little different types of alerts coming on me. Like I think my computer's going to blow up. So
Well, that was the
if
bast
it
part of the
blows
story,
up,
Jimmy. That was the
if
only
it
good part of
blows
the
up
whole
and I
story.
disappear, Joe, you know what happened to me? My computer's blowing up. Something's going on here this morning. I don't know what's going on, but it blew
That's
up.
right.
So,
That's all right. I can still
but
hear you, which is all that matters at this point, right? So yeah, so I think that
can you
if
see
we
me?
can,
Can you see me on
I
the
can.
camera okay, or is it
Yeah.
freezing on me?
Yep. No, I got you. I got you.
Okay.
You're there. I got you.
All
So
right.
if we can just understand that sometimes it takes more effort to create connections with people that have been hurt before by people, but it might not even have been you, right? But if we can do whatever we can do to continue those conversations, I think we're in a much better place. So hopefully we can do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a conversation yesterday also with an individual. They're just really struggling, because let's be honest, I think one of the most difficult and biggest challenges that all school leaders face is the idea of how to have that difficult conversation
Yeah.
with people in our profession or in our buildings who are underperforming or not doing their job or not doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? And the truth of it is, again, this is where we got to give our school leaders grace. The truth of it is there's no class in principal school that teaches us how to have those difficult conversations.
Yeah.
And I think especially, I know it was in my case, one of the reasons I tried to avoid those conversations early on in my career, let's be honest, when you take your first principalship at 26, first of all, you don't even know what the hell you're doing.
Right.
Second of all, you have staff on your team, right, that have probably been teaching longer than you've been alive, right? So I have to go have that conversation, right? I don't have the skills to have that conversation. And part of it is we know when we go in that we want to have a healthy culture. We don't want to alienate people. We want to be liked. We want to be respected. And the fear is that if we have those conversations, then people will get upset at us. And then it will create issues in our culture, right? We know this. And so it causes us to hesitate. Well, as we begin to, continue to mature and evolve in the role, eventually we kind of figure out, well, actually, I'm losing credibility. I'm hurting my culture by not having those conversations. And I do think our best people get really frustrated with that. So one of the things I want to hear from people that are joining us this morning, what are some things that you do in terms of when you have to have a difficult conversation? And why is it we avoid the difficult conversations? Why is it we avoid those? Because it is a skill set. Yep. And if we don't practice it, then we can't ever get any better, right? We can't ever get better if we don't practice that skill set. So that's one of the things that's really important is how do we begin to address people that are not performing at the level we need them to perform at, right? So the first thing is we got to recognize that number one is people don't want to do that. They just become that way. Number two, there is no class that teaches us how to deal with people that are underperforming, right? But we have to acknowledge. So one of the things we do have to acknowledge the underperformance. We have to address the underperformance, but it has to start with a conversation. But I still think it comes from what I would say to people is when we have to go have a different conversation, what if we, again, just look at it differently? And instead of going in there and telling people what we see or what our issue is with them, what if we just start with a question, right? Let's start more with a question. Don't misdiagnose it. Don't make assumptions, right? Believe these people have good intentions. And by the way, they might not even have seen it. They might not even realize that they did that. So let's start there with a question saying, hey, again, I think we should always start with a question regarding to their own personal well-being. Where are they at right now at this point in place? But then come back and say, hey, I have a question for you. So talk to me a little bit about what happened with this student this morning, right? We start with that to see their perspective and understand it, because maybe their behavior and what they're doing does not align with our core values or how we want them addressing students. But obviously they've done that. And so rather than us coming in and pointing out what we saw or what we don't like, let's see their lens from it first and their experience and start there. So I do think that's a good strategy when we have to have difficult conversations, is to start first with a question, right? Listen and ask that question, and then even ask a follow-up question, because again, sometimes they give us a response, but then I think we have to go back again and ask a follow-up question. And so I think that's really important when we're talking about how people are dealing with their issues and how they're managing situations, whether it's in the classroom or their building, and we can all fall into that trap as well.
So two things that I think about when you're talking. One is that I think when it comes down to what we say that we have to address underperformance. Have we defined what underperformance is, right? Because I think a lot of times if it wasn't defined, and all of a sudden we're telling them that it is, now we have another conversation that we have to have because we didn't define what it was supposed to look like for them, or have them help define it for us. So kind of reframing that, like you had mentioned, and talking about what do you see? What would the intent? What are we really trying to get done here? And how can I help you with that process? I think that really helps. The other thing that I thought about was something that Ken Williams said a couple of weeks ago on one of his videos that I thought was just fantastic. He was talking about, everybody likes to be, wants to be liked, and as the leader, you're performing, you're moving people in a direction that sometimes they can't see. And the thing that he said is that your gift card game is going to take a hit. Like, you're not going to be as liked as you have been when you have to provide some purpose or movement for people that don't know exactly kind of where we're going as a group. So I think that's an important piece of what we do, is to define it. I will be making sure that we define the expectation, which is important, right? But the second piece is how can we help them meet that piece of it and go from there. The last thing that I thought about when you're talking is we talk about how it's difficult to have conversations, tough conversations, and it absolutely is. at the same time, how are we putting ourselves in the best logistical position to have those conversations? Are they always in one spot? Are we like, when I was a kid and I was going to get yelled at for a report card or something that I did, I knew exactly where that conversation was going to happen, right? That conversation was happening in the living room in a chair that I sat in that I never sat in unless I was getting yelled at, right? So if your conversations with people that are tough are always happening in the same place, they're always in your office, they're always at the table, there's always a big table between you, you're on one side, the other person's on the other, that always lends itself for every time they come in, they're going to be reacting to the logistics of the conversation. So what are we doing to meet them where they're? Do we go to their classroom? Do we have an open, setup where there's not a table in the middle? Are we just having, two chairs in a room that we can just kind of sit and talk? Do we mix that up so it's not always the same feeling when they come to that spot? Because if it's always, every time I got yelled at, I knew I was going to get yelled at. So I had a feeling walking into that living room and knowing where that chair was that I was going to get yelled at by my parents when I got to that chair. So I'd start walking to that chair a little bit slower, right? Or I'd take off to a friend's house because I knew they couldn't come get me there, right? Every time my report cards came, I knew where I was. I was never home when my report cards came, never, because I knew I was going to get yelled at for it. So go to somebody else's house. It's like if we can put ourselves in a kind of position to logistically have a conversation where it doesn't always feel like they're being knocked down and knocked down and knocked down, maybe they'll be more open to having a conversation.
Yeah.
Oh, Jimmy,
you know
one
what?
more thing, Jimmy,
Yeah,
one more
go
thing
ahead.
I want to say, because you taught me this. One of the things that you always used to talk about when you were talking to kids and staff. I know it was kids. You can have to tell me if it was staff. But
Yeah.
what you used to say to kids after you had a tough conversation with them was, do you know that I care about you? Do you feel like I care about you? And do you feel like I treated you fairly? Like when you answer, and I still use those, right? I asked a kid last week, do you feel like I treated you fairly? You know what I mean? I want to know.
You wonder what I'm doing, Joe? I'm just a mess this morning. I'm starting to have issues. I'm having my computer's overheating. Now it says my computer's not charging. I'm going to keep talking. I can hear you. I better take care of this or I'm going to go off completely off. I don't know what's going on.
This is the best picture. This is the best picture of you we've had all day. Oh, wait, no, now it's not. Joe, it was before. There you go. That's the best picture all day.
Joe, we're both a mess. We're both a mess, right? I'm a mess. You're a mess this morning. I mean, that's just the way it goes sometimes, right? I don't know what's going on.
Well,
I'm having all sorts of issues.
You're fine. You're
Tells
fine.
Me the battery's not charging. I'm plugged in. I don't know what's going on. So
yeah, it's just the way that it works. So. I know. We'll keep going. But
that would be called the fair care approach, Joe. That'd be called the fair care approach.
Yeah. Cool. I like it.
Yeah. So the idea is, yeah. So part of it is it's a framework, right? It's a reframing. It's a strategy. Because if you think about it, it's the idea is this. If I know going into a difficult conversation, right? If I'm going to address a student who's misbehaving, or I have to have a conversation with a staff member who's underperforming, the strategy is the idea is if I have that framework in my head, that means when I go have the conversation, if I already know I'm going to ask those two questions at the end of the conversation, then that holds me accountable to address it and to conduct myself in hopefully a more appropriate way. Not to come too aggressively, not to be upset at them, not to get too emotional, to watch my body language. So if I know I'm going to ask that, right, then it changes or it holds me accountable. It's like a self-accountability. So I don't overreact to a situation, right? Because I know at the end I'm going to say, hey, Joe, do you think I treated you fairly? If I already know that going in, then I better make sure that during the conversation, I am being fair. I am being empathetic. I am listening. I'm not trying to talk over them. I'm not trying to win the argument. I remember in my head that it's better to be kind than it is to be right? There's these other things that go inside that we can actually take responsibility for our own behavior because you're right. The reaction that we're getting is our also response. It's not an all or nothing. We contributed to that issue. It isn't all them. Sometimes it is us a little bit. I'm looking at the comments, so I really love the comments that people are sharing in here because part of it, it's sometimes not that we have to have the difficult conversation. It's how we have the difficult conversation.
Right.
Sometimes we don't approach it appropriately. That's what's creating the issue. It's not that you can be candid with somebody and still do it in an empathetic, compassionate way that's kind, right? and not
Right.
aggressive and not judgmental and not condescending. So we just have to remember that, because here's the thing. It's like we know these things, right? And yet it's in the moment. Sometimes we just miss it. And I think it's,
Right.
again, because the pacing of the job, the stress of the job, we have situations that are happening to us. And then because of that, I'll say it again, we're not perfect beings. We will sometimes not live our excellence, and that's
Yeah.
okay. And part of living our excellence is going back and owning it. And so I think that's where we can give ourselves a little bit of grace. The job is hard enough as it is without us beating ourselves up all the time. And I know we feel badly when we don't handle things or manage the things that we want to, and we don't get the result that we want. But as long as we continue to reflect, and as long as we continue to own it and circle back, because that is a great strategy for building culture, is to circle back and check back in and either ask for forgiveness, apologize, or come back and try to see it through someone else's perspective. So,
right. And ask the question. Ask the question. If you've developed a relationship with people and you were out of line, I hope that they'll be in a spot that they'll tell you. I think that's a big piece of what we do. But ask the question. Where do we go from here? How can I help moving forward? And I think you hit it on the head when it's like the whole concept of you don't always have to be right. You do have to be real. That changes the way that you walk into those conversations, in knowing that, are you listening to respond, or are you listening with purpose, right? Because when you listen with purpose and you listen for understanding, it's different than listening to respond. And because if you've already got your answer, ready for when they finish talking, then and honestly, I do that here sometimes too, Jimmy. Honestly, I have to be very cognizant of things that you say, right? Because I want to react right away and say, I love that. Or, oh, let's talk more about that. And so I'm over here kind of like writing down just literally a couple notes so I can kind of come back to the moment and be present and engaged with you. So what I'm saying, the reason that I'm saying that is, having a difficult conversation with a staff member is really, really hard, and we don't get a chance to, we don't have the training for it. But if we can practice it in other parts of our life, then there's a better chance when we walk into that difficult conversation, we're going to be prepared for it. Meaning, like when you're having a conversation with somebody, is every conversation, are you listening for understanding versus listening to respond? Because that's a really big component to having a difficult conversation with somebody, is not jumping on top of what their perspective is. So with all of our interactions, are we really listening to understand? If that's with kids, if that's with people, whatever the case may be, if that's with all of our situations, it changes the way that we then go into that difficult conversation, because we've had more practice that we didn't get when we went through the principal prep program.
Yeah, I really appreciate the comments, Lynn and Ross and Jove and Katie and Maria, Stephen. Thank you so much. If any of you want to jump into the studio, I would love to hear some of your thoughts and the role that you do. I mean, all of you right now are all successful in the work that you do. Please throw it in the chat box if you're interested. We'd love to have you in the studio and listen to your perspectives as well. Thank you for those that continue to comment in here, and we appreciate that. Again, no one on here has monopoly. No one here pretends to say, well, I have it all figured out. No, we're having a conversation because it will help us reflect. You will say something. I've already seen some comments that it causes me to reflect and thinking to myself, am I doing that right? And so this is what this is all about. It's about helping each other get better. And we'd appreciate if anyone wants to join us, because quite frankly, I'm getting tired of listening to myself talk, and I can listen to Joe talk all day, but I'm getting tired of myself talking here a little bit. Plus, my computer isn't even working, so I'm just worried. I've had red alerts, triangles with big exclamation marks all over my computer screen this morning. I have no idea what is going on. I just don't know what's going on. So.
Well, at least we don't say what kind you got, because we may want them as a sponsor at some point. So let's not deal with that right now, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm not going to throw it under the bus, so not at all. So.
This is the more that we can practice the tough. That doesn't mean that you need to go out and have a tough conversation with everybody that you know. I'm just saying that, one of the things that I learned in my doctoral program, which I think is really important to talk about, because of all the years I spent in this doctoral program, this is the one thing that I remember. So that was money well spent. So one of my professors, their name is Nancy Blair, she said, the greatest gift of service you can give to another human being is, for the time that they're with you, they are the center of your universe. So think about that just logistically. that they are the center of your universe in every conversation that you're having. And that to me is really where we want to start. And that's hard, and it's hard at home sometimes. It's hard at school sometimes. It's hard in a lot of places because as leaders, we have so many things that are on the checklist that just need to get done that we let the checklist take over the interaction. And if you're always thinking about the checklist as opposed to the connection, now you never you can do all the stuff on a checklist, but you haven't made any headway in terms of building people around you because you're just getting stuff done as opposed to building capacity to lead.
Yeah, I really like what you said there, Joe. And I want to go back because I don't want people to miss that. And I think you made a really valuable point that sometimes we forget. I don't know about you, but I felt there were so many times as a principal that I was better with other people's kids than I was with my own kids.
Yes,
Something's not
absolutely.
right there, right? We shouldn't
Yeah.
be giving more to other people's children than we give to our own children, our own families. And so when you said earlier is the idea is how do we become the same person at work that we are at home, right?
Mhm.
No, our family deserves the very best of us as well, right? Why are we giving it to everybody else and we get home we have nothing left for our own family? So that's why I do believe the idea of understanding what we value, what our own core values are, right? Because that way we can live those core values. It'll help us live those core values, whether we're in a school building or whether we're at home. Because at the end of the day, these strategies or these skills or having difficult conversations, it isn't just with other people, it's in our own homes, it's in our own personal relationships, right? And so when we begin to think about that's one of the things I think where a lot of school leaders struggle with, that there's just a lot of guilt about how either we're missing dinners, we're missing bedtime, and yet we're at an event or we're at a game or we're at something. And I think that's where we struggle a little bit sometimes, that guilt. I mean, look at me, Joe. I'm Mexican and Catholic. Can you imagine the guilt that I do to myself all the time? It's not good, Betty. It's not good. So, but I do think we struggle with that a lot. And so, anyway, so
Yeah, I agree.
I just made a really good point there. Just that these conversations, these skills benefit us in all aspects of our life. We
Yeah.
can't be one person in one environment and then go be a different person in a different environment, right?
Yep.
If we know and are very aware of our core values and what we value, then the question is that we have to ask ourselves as leaders is, do our beliefs, right? Or do our behaviors, I should say, do the behaviors that we conduct every day, do they mirror our beliefs?
Yeah.
In other words, are we who we say we are, or do we just say it and then we don't actually live it? And that's why
Right.
core values are critical for schools today, because the problem is if we're not living the core values, right, then it's just words about words. We can talk all day about relationships and kindness and excellence and inclusion, and then we walk into a building and people aren't modeling that. And so it's
Mhm.
very hypocritical, it's disingenuous. And so we have to be really intentional and recognize that in ourselves and be very aware. But the key is how do we address, we're going to circle back to the difficult conversation, how do we address those individuals then that are not living the core values, right?
Mhm.
That's the key. We can have the core values, but we have people violating those core values, and then we're all lose for it. We're hypocrites,
Right.
right? We're all going to lose. And so that's one thing. It's a reminder, especially for leadership teams. And that's why it's really hard as a principal with APs or deans or your leadership team. If one individual in the leadership team is not living the core values, we all lose. It's a
Yeah.
reflection on all of us, not one of
Yep.
us, all of us. And so that way we have to create a culture of permission, right? A culture that gives people permission. Joe, if you see me do that, please call me out on it, because I
Mhm.
probably don't see it, or I'm tired or exhausted or frustrated. And now I'm not going to model that. In other words, I'm
Mhm.
going to violate that core value. And that's why relationships will always be the foundation of everything. Relationships, relationships, relationships. Because if you don't trust your people, if you don't give them permission, if you get defensive, if you get your feelings hurt because people are calling you out, then we really don't have a really healthy culture.
No.
And so that is, in my opinion, so critical, because if not, those things just become words about words. They're meaningless, and we all lose in that regard.
Yeah, especially now because we don't have all the answers for the stuff that schools are going through right now, and we don't have to. but we have to find out ways that we can get them, and we have to be willing to say that we were wrong. Last year we were in the midst of all of this, and everything was going nuts, and people were getting really bogged down. And I remember, excuse me, I remember putting out a video to our staff to just say, or no, it was an email. It was an email to staff that just said, "Hey, I'm so proud of you. You're doing great things. This is one, everything's going well. You're doing a great job," and blah, blah, blah. Like, I was just trying to pump them up and pump them up and pump them up. And I got a text message from a staff member who said, "Joe, I'm just going to tell you, this is not what we need right now. We don't need cheerleader Joe right now. We need you to tell us that this is hard. We need you to be okay by saying this is really difficult." And so I made a video and I just said, that whole, here we go, pumping you up, I'm never going to stop doing that. But it did feel disingenuous if I wasn't going to come with context about how it happened. I was so happy that someone was willing to say something, because I had messed up, right? But I also, I had to go and actually make that right the best that I could. And I told him, I'm not going to stop being cheerleader guy. I'm just not. That's kind of who I am in terms of trying to pump people up. At the same time, I was doing it like I was doing an umbrella situation for the whole thing, as opposed to addressing the situation that was right in front of us, which is we're burned out. We're totally burned out. And we just need some time, or we need you to acknowledge that you see that we're burned out. And that's all I needed to do. And I think it was important to actually come on back to that piece of it. So that's something that, if we're willing to listen to the people we serve, and we should be always willing to listen to the people that we serve, we're definitely in a better place to move everyone forward.
Absolutely. I'm just looking at the comments, Joe, and I'm hoping that someone will jump in the studio with us. I want to hear your thoughts. You're making some great comments in there. Love for you to expand on those, and so let us know. We'll drop the email in here, or we'll drop the link in here. Let us know if you're interested in jumping in the studio with us. We're talking this morning a lot about difficult conversations and why do people behave the way they behave, and looking at our own behavior. So feel free to talk about any topic you want to talk about. That's why we're here, to listen to the issues and the situations you're facing every day as school leaders. And we'd love for you to join us here in the studio and share a little bit of your thoughts this morning. So,
or ask a question. If anybody wants to ask a question, if there's something that people want to know, if there are situations that are coming up, if that's just, or a general topic that you kind of want us to speak to and connect in, then we would love to do that. So,
I see one. I want to hear it. And I'm going to ask, I don't know, and I apologize. Is it Jove? Is it Jove? You got to help me, buddy. You need to come in the studio, because I just need to know.
Just answer that question. All you need to do is answer, Mr. Stickle. Just answer the question, Mr. Stickle.
That's right. Let's bring him in the studio. We'll put the link in here so you can jump in and join us. We'd love to chat with you here a little bit. That's awesome. And in case you're wondering, my last name isn't Cassis. It's not Cassis. It's not Bob Costas. It's
Cassis.
Cassis. It's like
Cassis.
Mikasa Sukasa, right? Ross Cooper, Joe May. Yeah, we'd love to have you in the studio. There is the link. Just jump in. We'll bring you in. We'd love to have you. So let us know if you want to go both audio and picture, or just one or the other. But yes, that'll be awesome. We're waiting for you to jump in with us, and we'd love to hear your thoughts or even your questions. So thank you so much for joining us here this morning. So we'll give you a couple seconds. And I am just grateful, Joe. I texted my mom and said, "Mom, do you got the rosary? Can you pray for my computer not to blow up right now?" You have no idea. I mean, seriously, you'd be freaking out too if you had these yellow and orange, and I don't know. It's weird. I've never seen that. I've never had this happen to my computer. I don't know what's going on.
Well, here's the thing. When you get on, all right. When you get on there,
he's here.
All right.
I've never seen that. I've never had this happen to my computer. Okay, we're going to have the same problem, Joe. I think it's because you have two different things going on. You have the live version, and then you're in the studio. So if you can turn one of them off, I think it'll take care of that back feed.
Yeah. There you go.
Okay, you got it. You have two different things going on. You have the live version, and then you're in the studio. So if you can turn.
There you go. We got you now.
He's trying to work on it right now because he's muted himself. That's good. So.
All right. There you got it, man. How you doing?
Oh, he's here.
You guys have great haircuts, man. I'm telling you.
You bet.
Yeah, that's all right. Fantastic. So first and foremost, how do we pronounce your name?
It's Jove.
Jove. All
Yes.
right, Jove.
Okay.
Thank you so much for coming in today, Jove. We really appreciate it. You're sharing some really great thoughts in there. So what'd you want to pop in and talk about?
Well, first off, Joe, I just want to tell you, I heard great things about you before I even knew about you. Jerry Gallagher is a real good friend of mine. I went to college with him at the University of Northern Iowa, him and Kelly. And so I heard about you long before I guess you were kind of getting out there on the scene. So good people.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I was with him. We were watching the UNI. Was it 2005? Was it 2000? Must have been 2000. What was it? What was the Sweet 16 year? 2010?
10, I think.
Maybe?
Yeah.
10, I think. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I remember that was just. It's been such a fun run because I had a couple kids that I'd coached that played there, the Cook boys that played there. So it was fun to kind of watch them grow up and go through it. And Jerry was with that, and Kelly was with it the whole time. So thank you so much for coming in, Joe. What do you want to connect on?
Well, I guess one of the things that I struggling with right now is we've got a staff that's been together quite a long time, really, and so one of the things is I think people are just kind of getting tired of each other. You know, they've been around each other for a while. We've got a pretty good culture developed, but I think at times there's just that they're just struggling with one another because they've just been around each other so long. So I guess my big thing is what do you guys suggest on how to deal with that situation?
Joe, I have a thought on this. So here's what I'm going to say to you. So I want you to think about this just for a second. You said the people are getting tired about this, and I think it's just because they've been around with each other for so long, right? Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. The first question I'm always going to ask is, why are they tired with each other? And then you gave me a response, correct? And you think it's because they've been around with each other. And I'm going to say to you, don't make that assumption.
Gotcha.
So what I would suggest is go back and ask them, hey, so here's the thing. So remember, we talked about this idea of leadership sharing a vision. What is Jove's vision? His vision is he wants to create this culture where people aren't tired of each other, that people want to connect, that people want to be around each other. So go ahead and share that vision with them, because I think ultimately it sounds like that's what you want. Right. But then we talk about the four most powerful words in leadership. I need your help. Right. So the idea is to ask them, if we were going to create that vision, what would it look like and how would we do it? And then what you do is you begin to ask each individual, because somebody might say, I think part of the issue, Joe, is we're kind of tired of each other. Well, now you know that's an issue for that individual. But I wouldn't blanket it that's for everybody. Remember, everybody has a different story. So we have to understand, why are people behaving the way they behave, and why do they appear to be tired with one another? Let's go back and ask them. They may surprise you. It may be something completely different. So let's not misdiagnose it. They'll know. That's the idea of seeing the culture through the eyes of others. So I would maybe start there, share what you want, and then ask them for their help, and then see what the real issue is, and then ask them for help. So then how would we begin to address that? What's one thing that I or we could do differently to avoid that or not get in that situation? So that's maybe a suggestion I would say, just to start there.
I'd stay with the like, what's one thing that we can do to help that process? One of the things that I think is really important about having that conversation is what things are actually going well. What things do you like about the situation that we're in? Are there any things that you like about the situation? And then when you have the things that you can put something in place as the leader to make sure that those things continue. And if there's one thing that could change that would make them happier or make people move forward, then you think about what that one thing could be. But when we start saying, well, we're going to try this, and we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, then we don't know actually what works. And that whole mentality that, pizza parties don't build culture. But at the same time, some people just want to eat some pizza and hang out and talk. And that's okay. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you find out what they want, what they're looking for, and the fact that there are some things that are going on, and kind of reframe that, like Jimmy was talking about before, reframe it to things that are actually happening already, that are going well, anything that's going well, and how can we get more of that? Now you figure out that you're in not nearly as bad a situation as you had originally thought that you were in, and you can move people forward.
Right.
Joe, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think it's spot on. Really, it makes so much sense to me. I think part of it, I think I know some things that I'm just trying to be, just because I'm on here, I don't want to go get real specific, but I think part of it's just an accumulation of events, right? And I think some of that, it comes down to, like we've been talking about, having those tough conversations. And I think what you guys are saying is right, though. It's that, we get back to that shared vision, and I need your help. I need your help. This is, this is what we have going on. These are the what our shared vision is. And we need to get to that place, because we've kind of, it's like anything, you get complacent right over time, and you've got to make sure that you stay the course. I just was speaking about that in my morning message today, about staying the course and being committed to your why. And I think that's really, you guys helped me process that a little bit.
Well, Joe, two things I really respect about you. Number one, the fact that you come on here and you're that vulnerable as a leader, that to me is what you seriously, because a lot of us are experiencing that right now, or feeling that way, but we don't want to admit that, right? Just own it. Just say, hey, this is what I'm thinking right now. I'm worried. I don't know what it is. I don't know what to do differently. But then I saw in the chat box what you said. You said, I'm going to go back and sit down with my BLT, my building leadership team, right? And I think that's a great place to start. That should be a very safe place, that you have the best people in your building as leaders to help you reframe it and work through that process. So I think you're spot on with that one right there.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're definitely on my direction. Excellent job. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks,
let us know how it goes. And you also reminded us something else. We know that when you come on here, you have to share a problem of practice. Like, yeah, but I don't, I can't get into all these details. So it's a reminder again, if there are problems of practice, please email us at the Jimmy and Joe Weekly Show, right? And I think it was in there. We'll post it back in the comments again. But you can email it to us during this week, and Joe and I will go through them, and then we'll talk about them, right, in an anonymous way on in the Weekly Show next week. So that's a great reminder, Joe, for sharing that with us as well. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
We appreciate you being.
All right, buddy. Take care. But God bless, man. Keep leading the way. All right. Ross Cooper, we'd love to have you join us in the studio. I think you had shared you had a couple of things to share. Love to hear what you say. So join us. Jump in there. I think the link is in there, and we'll bring you on the studio here in a couple minutes. So, Joe, what are your thoughts on that? What Joe just shared?
I love the conversation about bringing it back to the leadership team and thinking about how we can move people forward. And the idea that we have to keep in mind is that, hey, Ross, turn off one of your feeds. So the idea that we have to keep in mind is that if we can really come back to the people that may be struggling, but we don't know for sure because we haven't asked them the question, then what are we really doing? So if we make a blanket assumption that everybody's feeling a certain way because we heard it from two people, that might not be the way everybody's feeling. So how can we make sure that we ask, if we have enough conversations, then we put ourselves in a better spot. I think that helps. So how can we make sure that? So you gotta turn off one of the feeds, either the live feed, live. If you turn off the one that you were watching,
I think I got it. Does that work?
Hey, good buddy. Good morning.
How you guys doing?
Ross Cooper, how is it possible that every time I see you get better and better looking? How do you do that?
This is what we're doing now. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing.
And by the way, Ross, you look so much better with that stocking cap on than Joe Sanfilippo does with his stocking cap on. I'm just saying.
God, what are we really doing here? Is this what he came on to talk about? I don't think so.
Yeah.
How you doing, Ross? How are things, man?
Good. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great. Thanks for popping in. That's great. I haven't seen you in a long time.
I know. You're supposed to come to New York. You guys are both supposed to come to New York, and these trips always get canceled.
In my office, man. In my office, right there. Look at that, right there. Huh? That's good. I got Aaron Murphy's book. It's awesome. All right, so here. So you wanted to pop on and talk about some stuff that's going on. What's going on? Tell me what's going on.
So I was going to talk more about those pizza parties that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Let's just talk about that.
Look, pizza parties at Pepe's are different than pizza parties when you have Domino's deliver. Let's be clear about that. No. All right. So I think you're in a different spot than I am.
That's the next book. No, but I think, I love the conversation about crucial conversations, because I can remember when I wasn't administrator. One of the big things you see is a lot of people don't even have them at all. Like they don't even try to have them. And then you have, there are people in organizations who are culture killers, and they kind of get away with it to an extent. And then the good people are kind of like, what the heck is going on? And it really kills morale. And I've seen a lot of that throughout my career. And it's kind of like, well, why am I going to talk to that person? People don't change, And so I've seen a lot of that. And something that I've gone back and forth on throughout my administrative career is like when to have like when to pull the trigger, like when to have that conversation and when not to have that conversation. Because you don't want to be known as like that crucial conversation guy. Whereas like every time something goes wrong, you're like, oh, I got to talk to Ross again. Or Ross is going to come into my room and put his arm around me and say, hey, what's going on? Like, I don't need it because I spoke about a faculty meeting,
Right.
So I think like, I remember one time, like as a principal, like I pulled the trigger when I probably shouldn't have. It was regarding like the way a certain staff member spoke to students. And the staff member looked back at me and was like, I don't do that. And like, I was scared. I was like, never mind. Like, and I was like, I ran away with my tail between my legs. I'm like, that did not go well. So I think that's something I go back and forth on, is when to have it and when not to have it.
Right. I totally agree. Because we want to make sure that we put them in a position to actually understand what's going on and have the conversation and not get defensive right away. I mean, I think we've all been in conversations with people where we make a suggestion about what would go on in the classroom, and the person that we're talking to is like, well, I did that before you showed up. I did that after you were only here for 45 minutes. I did that before you came or after you left. And that's on us for not having the conversation about, what's going well, what's connecting, how can I help you? Because if we're always coming in and saying, well, we should change this or we should do that, then that's the guy that you become, right? That's the crucial conversation guy. And every time you walk into a room, it's like now when we were going through the COVID stuff and our high school principal would walk into a room, it was like everybody would turn and walk away because he was coming to get kids that now had to go on quarantine. So every time he started walking down the hallway into a classroom, people are like, nope. Who's next, right? And and he felt awful about that, but that's the situation that he was in. And if that's always the guy that you are in that spot, then it ends up being a real tough situation. So I think you make a really good point in when you have the conversation and how you have the conversation. But the logistics matter. I really truly believe that the logistics matter. If it's, the time of day, when it's happening, where it's happening. I really believe that, because you're not there to slam someone. You're there to help them. And if you put them in the best position to actually understand that by making them feel as comfortable as they can in a situation that's going to be uncomfortable, then you're better served for it in the long run, I think.
Did Jimmy leave?
I think so. That was the Joe and Ross show, right? That's right.
Because Ross is here. Goodbye.
He took off. He's never left the show before, so that's on you, Ross. I've been at all these things. He never just up and took off. So that's just the way that it works. But I appreciate it. Any more thoughts to share on the conversations or anything that goes along in terms of building?
One more thing, and then I'll let you go, and you'll be by yourself. Unfortunately,
that's right. Unfortunately for everybody.
I know. If you could give someone a heads up as to the fact that it's going to take place, which is difficult because a lot of times, like we might like as an administrator, we might stop in a teacher's room and say, hey, like, I'm going to come talk to you during, your prep or whatever it might be. But you always, and sometimes when it's a good thing, you could say, oh, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. But in this case, it kind of is a little bit of a bad thing. So you don't want to lie. Right. Yeah. So like, what is like a way that you could give somebody a heads up that it's going to take place? One, so they don't feel blindsided during the meeting itself. But two, if you let them know, it's a double-edged sword, because if you let them know a crucial conversation is going to take place, then like all this anxiety builds up. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So
right. It's kind of a balance. It's like a balance of when it's going to happen. So it's not too far out, but you're not blindsiding them. That's a really good point.
Yeah. So that's something I think about too, because you have to build that psychological safety.
And I don't know what the answer to that is, Ross. I think what it comes down to is, do you know your staff member well enough to know what's going to make them feel the most comfortable before having that conversation? And if you don't, is that on you? I mean, honestly, is it? I mean, and I would believe that it is. If I don't know a person well enough to know when the best time to have a conversation with them is, it means that I haven't invested enough in them in the moment, which is something that I need to reflect on myself.
Yeah. It's like building the relationships ahead of time. So you have time, when it's time to have that crucial conversation, it's an easier conversation, right?
Yeah.
It's not even a conversation.
Right. Yeah. It's a social capital that we build up moving forward. So when we have to dip into that bucket, we can. And if it's authentic and genuine, you put yourself in a better spot. So awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Ross. I appreciate you coming in, man. Jimmy came back. He came back.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you got a new. I bet you he's got a new computer. Do you got a new computer?
No, it's a
No,
mess.
I thought
It's a
so.
mess.
That's right.
I'll have to do some troubleshooting. But Ross, first of all, thank you so much for joining us here. And just as you were saying that, a couple things, it's just a reminder, right? People, the question is this: why? It's not just because they're afraid to have the conversation. Sometimes it's because they avoid the conversation for whatever reason, but sometimes it's because they think they don't have time to have the conversation, right? And the reason I bring that up is because you just shared a great point that I don't want to lose it, and that is when we have to reframe and see that differently. And I'm going to encourage people to see it as trading time. It's not that you don't have time. You need to trade the time, because here's the example. Because we don't think we have the time to have the conversation on the front end, right? We go over here and set the expectations. Are we clear what we expect from people? Do we put the support systems in place? Do we have a process for growing, developing, supporting people, et cetera, right? We convince ourselves we don't, but look what happens, because now when that issue happens, we're over here on the back end, and now we find the time now, don't we?
Yeah.
And that time we have to pick up the pieces. It's not fun time. It's stressful time. It's yucky time. So I think we convince ourselves that we don't have time, and that's why the front loading, I think you said it, Ross, it goes back to how much time are we willing to invest on the front end so we can trade the time so we don't pay for it on the back end, which hurts our culture. So again, thanks for sharing that. We appreciate it. And hey, Mike, I have a computer that's working right now, but I don't even want to go back and look at this at the replay. So thanks, Ross. Great seeing you, buddy.
All right.
Thanks,
I'll see you
Ross.
gued.
Great seeing you, man. Take care of it. Well, we had a couple
Joe,
people jump in.
we are
and have
at
great
the hour,
conversation.
over the hour, because of computer issues, but go ahead and we'll end it here. So
yeah, I want to just tell everybody thank you so much for joining us, and these conversations are really fun for us to have, and we hope that they're fun for you. And if there's ever a time that you want to reach out throughout the course of the week, there's an email that you can reach out, and you can ask some questions, and we'll kind of bring those topics up. Now, I have more respect for people that are doing shows like this, like on a daily basis. This is hard stuff. And and the more voices that we get from outside, the better the show is, right? So the more stuff that we can get from people, we really want to do that. Please feel free to email us some questions, problems of practice. Jump in. We want to have you as part of the show. And the more that we can get the voices of everybody out there, the better that chance that we can have to amplify all the leadership opportunities and traits that we have around the country.
yeah, we want to thank you, Jove, and thank you, Ross
Thank
Cooper,
you, Ross.
for joining us this morning. And thank you for all of you who shared your thoughts and comments in the chat box. We really appreciate it. Like Joe said, this show's really for you. And so the more you can join us and share your thoughts and reflections, the better the show will be. So you're absolutely right, Joe. I'm stressed out today. I did not have a good day this morning. So, all right.
You know what? You can leave your excellence. You can live your excellence now at this point, right?
Start with your computer, Jimmy. We'll see you next week. God bless everybody.
Right,
take care.
Yeah, take care. All right. Go Crickets.